am kind of like scatterbrained right now. I was sitting next to a girl and Mary was overthinking, so I got switched to an empty seat.
Are you kidding me? Are you actually kidding me? This makes me so angry. Brandan's dropping everything in his life, moving to the other side of the world to be with Mary, but she threatens to break up with him because he sat next to a woman on the plane.
When you buy plane tickets and you're picking your seat, it's not like you can see what gender a person is sitting next to you. Like, I can't control that.
And Mary must know that. She's either deliberately pushing him away or she needs therapy, urgently. This woman shouldn't be in a relationship. Either way, before we jump into why Brandan's move to the Philippines is such a big mistake, we left the pair last week at odds with Brandan's family.
My mom and my siblings made it clear that I can't rely on them to support my relationship with Mary. Ever since then, we haven't been talking.
Brandan's not in the headspace to hear the truth from his family, perhaps because he still feels a sense of betrayal from his mum because of her past addiction. He views her attempts to protect him as, oh, here's another thing she's going to let me down on. And he much prefers the company of his godparents, who are far more understanding of his bizarre relationship. And we see this as his godparents take him out for one last fishing trip before his big move.
Is there going to be cell service when we get to the river spot?
Yeah, it might not be as good of fishing there, but we tried to pick somewhere that had a little bit of service.
You've got to give it up for his godparents. They really do seem like genuinely nice, caring people. To the extent that they're willing to go to a worse fishing spot, a spot that they've had to research in advance, just so that Brandan has cell service so he can stay connected to a sleeping Mary. This is the kind of support that Brandan was looking for from his own mum. However, while it's sweet that his godparents don't want to alienate him, there are questions here about how much they're enabling him. Because the truth is, both his and Mary's behaviour is absolutely unreasonable.
I have to be on the phone with Mary when I go, or we have a really big fight.
You get service back?
Yeah. There we go.
Now, the last time that Brandan went fishing and lost signal, Mary immediately accused him of cheating. Notice Brandan's phrase here, I have to be on the phone with Mary. Their fight was so big that Brandan now feels he has no choice in the matter. His priority is to stay connected with Mary out of fear that she'll leave him if he doesn't. It's bizarre, especially considering she's sleeping. But it's pretty clear that his fear of abandonment has deeply affected Brandan's social life.
Since being with Mary, he doesn't go out and do barely anything anymore because he has to have that constant connection with Wi-Fi, and that kind of sucks a little bit.
Now, it may only be 2 episodes, but I don't need to see any more than this to already know that this is a deeply toxic relationship. They're both emotionally abusive to each other. Both Brandan and Mary have encouraged the other to cut people out of their lives and disconnect with reality so that they stay dependent only on each other. It's got so bad that Brandan's been sending almost all the money he earns to the Philippines.
Over the past year, all my paychecks that were coming in were going straight to building the house and to Mary. It was close to like $50,000, $60,000.
Brandan reveals that he's been sending this money to buy a house, but the numbers aren't adding up. Like, we know that Brandan's really struggled to save $2,000 for his flight to the Philippines. So to be able to save up $60,000 in 1 year means he must have been earning a very healthy sum of money. So what does he actually do for a living if he still lives rent-free in an RV?
I've had many odd jobs in my life. Bagging groceries, washing windows, a delivery driver, a deli clerk. But I've lost about 3 or 4 of them because of my relationship with Mary.
And sure, those are all good, honest jobs. But how much must he have been working to have been able to afford to send $60,000 overseas within just 1 year? That's a lot of money, and it's made a bit more complicated by the fact that Brandan reveals Mary's constant demands to always be on a video call with him have actually cost him multiple jobs. Now, while he might not seem too concerned by this, his godparents certainly are. They try to take advantage of the fact that Mary's currently sleeping, and they ask Brandan some difficult questions, like, what on earth will you do if this relationship doesn't work out?
She doesn't want you there. She wanted to keep the house and everything he owned.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about her pulling that card. She's not gonna do that.
You guys haven't even met yet.
Brandan is 23 years old, but there's this childishness, this naivety about him. Like, for example, he goes on to say, nothing will drive us apart, as if he's living in some kind of romantic fairy tale where everything ends with a happily ever after. It almost makes me wonder whether the trauma of his childhood has somehow emotionally stunted him. Even his godparents see it.
He's a good kid, and there'll come a point where he becomes an adult, and I don't think he's quite there yet.
He'll have a lot of growing up that'll happen when he gets to the Philippines,
exactly.
Absolutely.
I think he somehow sees himself as some kind of knight in shining armour from a fairy tale. He's off to save his princess. He's pulling her out of the darkness that her ex left her in. But whatever the truth, the day has finally come for his flight across the world.
Trying to get used to a new culture is kind of scary. It's gonna be like being reborn as a little toddler and you're trying to make your way up in a new world.
Brandan views this move as a fresh start for him, and the fact that he sees himself as a toddler just reiterates what we said about his trauma. He views this move as an opportunity to redo the things in his life that he didn't like the first time around. The question is he really ready to let go of the past? Because the thoughts of his mum not meeting him at the airport is clearly playing on his mind.
It would feel good to know that she cared enough to be there for me, say goodbye. But the other night, my mom was definitely going a little hard on me.
Brandan just can't see how his mum taking a stand against his relationship is her way of trying to protect him. In his eyes, he sees her as standing in the way of his life goals, as an obstacle to his happily ever after. Now, it's a classic move in an abusive relationship to alienate your partner from their friends and family in this way. But what Mary seems to have underestimated is just how much love his mum has for him, because she shows up to the airport despite everything.
I want you to go.
I love you too, Mom.
You're gonna be okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna be okay.
Brandan is so stoic. He speaks in a monotone voice and he barely shows any emotion. But even he can't hide just how pleased he is that his mum is here to say goodbye. But his mum does have some advice to get off her chest before he leaves. And I really hope that Brandan's listening.
I just really hope that when you get over there that you won't allow manipulation or controlling to be part of your lifestyle. You don't deserve that.
You don't deserve that, says his mum, and that does appear to be something that Brandan needs to hear. By his own admission, Brandan says that his father raised him in quite a hostile environment. And when it comes to abuse, patterns often repeat themselves. Maybe Brandan's willing to be treated like this because he thinks he deserves it. Maybe Brandan himself is emotionally controlling and abusive because that's what he learnt from his childhood. A part of me questions whether this is hurting his mum so much because she feels helpless watching the kind of toxic relationship that she may also have been in.
When I started using drugs, he lost all faith in what I said and how I lived, and I can't blame him.
And while Brandan's mum takes responsibility for the damage to their relationship, she blames and resents Mary for their inability to mend that gap now that she's sober. You can see just how worried she is that she might never hear from her son again. And to be honest, knowing what we know about Mary, that's a very logical fear to have.
Physically, you're going to be so far away, but emotionally, can we just not be so far away?
Don't worry, I'll keep in touch with you. Come here.
Will the distance between them help to ease Mary's worries about Brandan's mum's female housemates? Will this mean that she'll be okay with Brandan retaining a relationship with his mum? Well, we'll just have to see. But for now, Brandan is filled with his sense of liberation. He's leaving everything behind to start fresh with a girl he thinks he loves. But Brandan's put all his eggs in this basket. All his savings have been poured into this house. He's cut off relationships with friends and family, all for a girl he hasn't even met in person. A girl who has severe trust issues. So severe that Brandan can't even sit next to a random woman on the plane.
When you buy plane tickets and you're picking your seat, it's not like you can see what gender a person is sitting next to you. Like, I can't control that.
It's so hard to understand why Mary's acting the way she is. She's an intelligent lady, right? She was doing a Bachelor in Science before she dropped out. So she should be smart enough to know that he has absolutely no control over who he sits next to on the plane. Like, it's hard to tell whether she's intentionally trying to ruin this relationship so that she can keep the house he's paid for, or whether it's self-sabotage because she doesn't think she deserves this relationship. Wherever the truth lies, the severity of her control and jealousy issues should be enough to have Brandan parachuting out of that plane. This isn't the kind of relationship you want to be moving for.
I'm kind of like scatterbrained right now. I was sitting next to a girl and Mary was overthinking, so I got switched to an empty seat.
The fact that Mary's acting like this after everything Brandan's done to be with her honestly just makes me angry. How can either of them possibly think that these kind of deep-rooted issues will magically disappear when they're together in person? The thing is, while Brandan constantly seems to appease and enable Mary, it's perhaps reassuring to see that even he has his limits.
It really frustrates me.
Look, if Mary truly, really, honestly, deep down believes that Brandan's the type of guy that would flirt with every girl he meets, the kind of guy that would cheat on her because he happens to sit next to a random woman on the plane, then the real question is, why does she even want to be with him? The situation is just so illogical that it highlights just how much of a mess Mary's mind must be in. She really needs to do some work on herself. She needs to get some help to figure out why her thoughts go in that direction. Why does she think the worst of a man who's done so much to prove he really loves her? But in addition to this, Brandan also needs to draw some firm boundaries with her. He can't allow her to be like this.
Finally on the way, I've sacrificed a lot to get to that point, and I don't think I deserve that.
He heard what his mum said to him at the airport. You don't deserve that. And maybe this is a sign that Brandan's actually starting to believe it. It's amazing the difference the support of a mother can actually make. If Brandan can start to dig deep and start to love himself more, this might give him the confidence to stand up to Mary more than he's been doing so far.
I can only tolerate it up to a certain point. I don't know what to say, what to do. It makes me very worried about whether or not I'm making the right choice.
Brandan, there should be no doubt that you absolutely have made the wrong choice here. You two aren't right for each other. You seem to bring out the worst in each other. And the fact that Mary continues to send him a barrage of really hurtful texts, despite the fact that he's not even seated next to anyone on the plane to Manila, makes it clear to see that this fresh start that he spoke about really isn't the fairy tale he thought it would be.